Hey Markku, it's such a privilege to get to speak to you today because you're one of the SSH alumni that has been there almost from the beginning. Do you still remember when you used Secure Shell for the very first time?
I don't have the exact date in my head, but it must have been in 1996. It could have been 1995 on the initial thing. I remember it was version 1.1 perhaps, something like that. We had it in our university systems in US already at that point, pretty early on. Yeah.
And how did you then come to work for SSH?
So I was a second year math student in Jyväskylä, and I had this interesting cryptology. It was actually it was not a there were no crypto courses in Finland at that point, but I've read some books. I've read Bruce Schneyer's Applied Cryptography second edition immediately when it came out in '95. Um, I had some programming skills. I could write C code and such, so I just sent an email to Tatu saying that, I know a little bit about crypto. I read this book and I've done some coding and such that, do you have like a job available? And I think Tatu just sent me an email saying that, yeah, sure, yeah, come for an interview. So I went to Technopolis in Otaniemi and I was hired.
Mm.
So at that point, the my first business card, because I still have it, already said cryptographer. So SSH had developers, of course, and Tatu didn't consider himself to be really a cryptographer, but he of course knew a lot about that subject matter. But me being a sort of more of a mathematician ended up having that sort of role. But of course, my job description was actually writing the C code for SSH2 for most part.
Do you still remember some fun customer stories from the early days? Like not naming any names, but
Well, one thing that surprised me was the speed by which SSH was taken up around the world. So we were just like a small setup in Espoo, like a handful of people, not more than 12, including marketing and all of the operations. And we had customers in all kinds of places. So I especially remember like receiving a sort of a support call from one of the nuclear laboratories in the United States. So it was I think the American like security services were trying to like develop some sort of like a cryptographic method to enable these logins, but in these laboratories they just decided that SSH is so much easier to use that they just put it in place in there. And it was a funny experience, me being like 22 years, no security clearance, nothing like that, receiving this sort of like, can you help us set this system up? And sure we did, and we were very proud of that. And I believe that made their systems a lot more secure.
so you are now a world renowned cryptographer. Like your opinion is really much appreciated all over the world. What of the things that you learned at SSH did you take on with your next assignments and stuff? Like, what do you feel the legacy is from your time at SSH?
Yeah, so this was almost 30 years ago. But I mean that work just threw me straight into the deep end of the pool, so to say. So all of the many of the security vulnerabilities that still exist today in systems we already knew about, like buffer overflows and such. And so I was there writing this sort of a internet-facing code, like the SSH server, writing C code for it, and those skills, the C code and Unix system, that's absolutely like timeless. That's totally with me. And also this sort of a more practical aspect of cryptology that we had to deal with. Many of the basic attacks that still bury every developer who develops cryptographic software. We had to think of at that point. So the learning curve was really steep, and we were at the SSH server. It is like the one place that is really facing all of the threats in the world. So yes, a lot of technical stuff that is still relevant.
So what do you consider right now to be the most pressing cybersecurity issue that should be addressed, either in your field of cryptography or like on a broader scale?
It's the most pressing thing. I work mostly with post-quantum crypto, and perhaps the most pressing thing is ensuring the quality of these new implementations that are coming out, because we have to insert these new, more complex algorithms into all kinds of places where we have elliptic curve crypto and RSA crypto. Is just to you're touching some places that really you shouldn't touch in a code base unless you absolutely have to, and that creates a lot of risk. So that might be one of the things. Generally speaking, also platform security, like your boot up processes and such tend to be a problem area. I work a lot now with semiconductor devices, so things like microcode updates and firmware updates on these are the sorts of things that can be especially dangerous if they are badly built, and now people are rebuilding them for post-quantum crypto. So I think they need to be really careful when they do that.
Yeah, I guess the lesson learned from all sorts of TLS things on the user layer is that implementation is the place where we usually make the mistakes, if we make mistakes. So it doesn't really matter how robust the mathematics under like the cryptographic primitives are if you mess it up on the higher layers of like implementation of.
That's totally the case. So everyone knows that from sort of from the viewpoint of the adversary, the easiest thing to attack is the endpoint, your implementation, whatever it is. And at SSH we certainly learned that. So yeah, we improved. It wasn't perfect immediately when we started, but we iterated really quick and learned these aspects. And many of those lessons are still absolutely valid. And so endpoint security, minimizing your attack surface, doing just good engineering, verification of that's super important. It's even more important with post-quantum than in traditional, because we used to think that like elliptic curve crypto is complex, but no. So, like, elliptic crypto is easy peasy compared to implementing some of these post-quantum crypto algorithms securely.
Yeah. So what do you see in the post-quantum cryptography? Like, there are now standards by NIST, MLChem, MLDSA, and so forth, but on the signature side, there is still that Onramp competition going on, and how do you view that? I think there's maybe other like 14 contesters now still in the running. Like, how does that look like?
Yeah, I wonder where they will end up being used. Yeah, I can't predict. Some of it is, I'm actually a co-author on one of those candidates, and even myself, I'm not sure, what the practical use case will be. But it's good to have backups. MLChem and MLDSA are both based on this lattice crypto. So if something happens, then you would have like already evaluated some other schemes and have those available. So I think that's the main motivation why NIST is doing for the Onramp thing, because they standardize two lattice-based signature schemes, Falcon and Dilithium.
Yeah, you mentioned Falcon. I'm shamelessly using this opportunity to ask your opinion of it. Like, do you actually see use case for Falcon, or is Falcon the FNDSA the kind of standard that will not see use because it's not small enough, like compared to MLDSA, to actually be beneficial as a smaller option? Or do you actually have some sort of application in mind where it would make sense to do it with Falcon?
Yeah, so there's the size aspect, but as you know, it's not like an order of magnitude smaller. It's just like some percentages, like tens of, it's not very significant in practice. It is faster on some types of computers. So if you have a high-end CPU with these sort of vector units in it, then it can be probably faster than Dilithium. So I guess in those kinds of applications, currently it's difficult to say because the spec is still not out at this point of time. So it is an algorithm that is being modified between the selection and the actual standardization. So difficult to say. But yeah, I know the main designer very well, and I have to say that yeah, it's difficult to see the actual use cases for that particular algorithm.
What's your opinion of end-to-end encryption in general? Because there has been some, well, governmental entities who have advocated once again, like they did 30 years ago, that government should have ability to monitor certain traffic, and then that would mean that it would ban, for instance, end-to-end encryption on networks.
Yeah, we had this for a long while. So SSH had this at the time almost like anarchistic viewpoint on this, and which for us the security of the customer came first, and I think that it needs to come first. You know, the product is there to protect customers' data. So building backdoors into things is not a good way to go. And my commercially, I would think that there will be always customers that want to have end-to-end security. So there will be commercial providers for that. And yeah, so that's.
Do you have like something that we can say when these things they come up once in a while? Somebody comes up with a great idea that in order to protect children from whatever, we should have like. Do we have like some sort of like a go-to answer that we could say, like we've been practicing saying the same answer for 30 years, but yeah, do you have like a good one to use?
No, I have not come up with any better answer except saying, you know, only the bad guys will have good encryption at that point, and you know, criminals, how would they care about someone banning like this sort of activity or yeah, it's
it's a battle you cannot win in my opinion. Like,
yes,
it's
especially because you know the bad guys can totally just ignore your ban on encryption. It's not hard.
So you just tie the hands of the good guys,
yeah,
and
exactly.
Then leave it for the playing field for the evil. In cryptography, these days you do a lot of teaching, right?
So well, I have my courses, yeah.
Yeah. So what is something that if like when you started, obviously there wasn't that much that you could do, but nowadays there's like so many things. So if somebody would want to focus on cryptography, where in the area of cryptography would you advise them to focus right now, like the new mathematicians and new cryptographers?
I mean, it's good to get solid foundations, but where? I mean, I encourage let's say PhD students to go whatever like interests them. Basically, I think it's a wide enough space to have all kinds of people. I mean, some are just like more engineering oriented. They would look at the implementation security aspects, side channel security, do some hardware work on that. Some love the advanced theory, and even for me or for many other practicing cryptographers, you know, some constructions are pretty exotic and elaborate, and perhaps will not find commercial use. But I still encourage, like, that's an interesting problem. Let's look at it, and perhaps it will be useful later on. Because for sure, for example, the stuff that we use in post-quantum crypto now, which is completely mainstream, 15 years ago, I would have probably just that to be like, okay, that's never going to be used in practice. But things happen, and all of a sudden, those things become necessary, and we have to adapt.
Yeah, it's a similar thing. When I started at SSH, I was told that don't bother yourself with the IBM mainframes because they're dying away, and then it turned out that actually there's quite a bit of them still used to this day, and a lot of this plain text connections happening that need to be secured between the mainframes and the rest of the world. So
yeah,
it's it seems to be like with everything, it's very difficult to make those predictions. Like if you had the magic 8 ball, I mean, it would be so easy if you could just look into the future. But
yeah, that's why it's good to have like solid foundation. So being just having good mathematical basics, so that you have your linear algebra, your abstract algebra, your probability, your complexity theory, your information theory, your coding theory. Having all of these foundations well laid out, that helps you to work basically in crypto in a broader way. And incidentally, all of those, like knowing something very well allows you to like design crypto systems that use, let's say, coding theory or some of the other aspects. Coming back to the IBM thing, MLChem and MLDSA, the main designers are IBM, and right now these mainframes are like the first platforms where they have like assembly instructions specifically for Kyber and Dilithium, so they have hardware support for it. It's like the most advanced hardware platform at the moment.
Yeah, on the software side, we came out with the Tectia Zero Trust and the Quantum Safe editions a few years back. So we managed to get it. Well, we needed to get it out even before IBM got their PQC things out, because we had mutual customers who needed to get the. At that point, it was the round 3 Kyber combined with elliptic curve key diffie-Hellman, so that they were able to make sure that their connections are quantum safe going forward. And these, I think one of the, I don't know how you view about this, but one of the misconceptions in my mind is that this idea that this post-quantum cryptographic transition would be like a one thing that you do it once. Like there's a wishful thinking that if we just follow the guidelines, the pieces of paper that state certain years like 2030 in the US for preferring post-quantum cryptography and then sunsetting the elliptic curve keys and like RSA and finite field groups by 2035, that in my mind is going to be a lot more iterative process. Like when do you see that we get the signatures sorted out by 2030?
Oh, yeah, so the whole PKI transition, that's going to take a long while. It's because it's well, one step at a time. So I of course doing. I mean, the typical example is just moving from SHA to SHA-1. That was supposedly a single transition. Yeah. But it was, but they had to plan for it. They had to like have a whole program for the. It was, I think they called that one also a cryptographic modernization program, where they were just going from SHA-1 to SHA-2.
And that was just like doing hash stuff, like, and now we're fixing.
Yeah, so I mean, and so that this one also has to be split into many different transitions that one has. But the public key infrastructure is going to be tricky, and like things like authentication cards, your if it's using signatures for authentication, then you actually have to like invent new hardware for that with very specific security requirements, and replacing all of these authentication cards is complicated. Smart cards. Yeah, it's going to take a while because we don't have even the PKI standards like X549 with Dilithium is not finalized. And after you have the actual standard, then you would have to like change all of the infrastructure, issue new certificates, issue new hardware, issue new everything. So
So do you have an opinion of like, do you like the hybridization on the like signature side, like like certificates, or do you kind of want to switch one PKI hierarchy to another one, like kind of a clean cut between them?
So I mean, there's a couple of things here. So I'm ready to trust these post-quantum crypto algorithms without hybridization myself. I understand there's regulation that requires hybridization, so sure we can implement it. It increases complexity, which is a risk, and so forth. But the hybrid signatures, for example, they just from the outside, it's just a single signature that it does two things. So if both signatures verify, then the entire composite signature, for example, verifies. So that sort of composite signature migration is just like moving from one signature to another. There's another type of hybrid where you would have parallel PKIs and so forth. You can set that up it can be actually a quite complex thing to set up and maintain, because you might have expiry dates which are not in sync and all kinds of problems. But yeah, but personally, I would be ready to go directly into post-quantum.
On the signature side.
On the signature and encryption.
Also on the chem.
Yeah, I would not see a problem with that. That's just my personal opinion.
Anything else that I haven't yet asked you that you would like to share?
Nothing specific comes to mind. You know, would love to connect with SSH a little bit more again. You know, go to some alumni events perhaps.
Yeah, I'm sure that can be arranged, especially this year when we're celebrating the 30 years. I think we have some events along the year.